and many thanks for joining in this class again today evening. So today's class is going to be shorter than yesterday's class. In yesterday's class, I had mentioned a few things about soft tissue sarcomas. First of all, it is not a very common malignancy. We don't get to see it as often as we see other malignancies like head, neck, breast, and cervical cancer or lung cancer. We see these tumors once in a while, and we don't see them regularly. The other thing I mentioned was that there has been a long journey of treatment from amputation to wide local excision. But in majority of the patients, wide local excision alone is not going to be enough. And any patient who has less than 5 centimeter superficial low-grade sarcoma probably can do well with surgery alone. Rest, everyone will require surgery and post-operative radiation therapy. Now, in post-operative radiation therapy, the treatment should start well within time. The upper limit of starting the treatment is 4 months. Ideally, we should start treatment at 4 to 6 weeks after completion of surgery once the wound is healed. There is a level 1 randomized trial evidence in the form of NCI Canadian trial, which compared preoperative radiation therapy versus postoperative radiation therapy for extremity sarcoma. And it showed that the local control rate with either modalities is absolutely same, but with preoperative complications, the wound healing issues are more, but these issues are more for lower extremity tumors and lesser for upper extremity tumors. But with preoperative radiation therapy, the main advantage that we all get is the advantage is in the form of reducing the long-term or the late complications. So I mentioned it to you yesterday that whenever I am counseling a patient, I ask them whether they are ready for more acute side effects, which are going to get over in few months versus lifelong side effects. And majority patients in that case would vouch for preoperative radiation therapy rather than post-operative radiation therapy. Now, sometimes you will hear it in your tumor boards or multidisciplinary team meetings that radiation therapy does not contribute to survival. There is enough evidence from National Cancer Database and long-term results of preoperative versus post-operative radiation therapy, which have all shown that in long term, it is like the breast cancer picture that earlier it reduces the radiation, reduces the local recurrences, but in long term, it also improves the overall survival of these patients. Now, we expect that radiation therapy will reduce the local recurrences, will contribute in reducing the local recurrences by about 20 to 30%. So 5-year local control rate after a good resection, R0 resection, and radiation therapy are in the tune of 90%. Tomorrow, if you face any patient who has any unresectable sarcomas and your multidisciplinary team suggests using neoadjuvant chemotherapy, you should always argue, and because for neoadjuvant chemotherapy, there is no level 1 evidence, while for radiation therapy, there is level 1 evidence. And as of now, when we talk of management of soft tissue sarcomas, we treat almost all soft tissue sarcomas similarly, whether it is a MPNST or a synovial sarcoma or a liposarcoma. But we expect that in times to come, we will have different kind of treatment regimes for different histological subtypes of sarcomas. As of now, that is not available to us. There is a certain dose-response relationship which has been identified for sarcomas. For preoperative radiation therapy, the dose is 50 gray in 25 fractions. There is no concurrent chemotherapy in that. For postoperative sarcomas, the general dose ranges from 60 to 66 grays. There are a couple of papers which also talk about using radical radiation therapy in unresectable soft tissue sarcomas, where people have escalated doses up to 70 gray and have shown a local control rate of about 50% at 2 years. But whenever we are escalating doses, whenever we are going beyond 50 gray, it has to be done in phased manner with shrinking field technique. External beam radiation therapy for sarcoma can be given with conventional radiation, 3D CRT, IMRT. Now we have some data for IGRT usage in soft tissue sarcoma also. With the use of IGRT, we are able to decrease the PTV margins for sarcoma patients, and it all ultimately helps us in reducing the late complications for the patients. But don't forget, let's not undermine the value of conventional external beam radiation therapy, which we have been using for many, many years for our patients of soft tissue sarcoma. But the cornerstone of treatment of soft tissue sarcoma is wide local excision plus intraoperatively done, perioperatively treated brachytherapy, which is called as interstitial brachytherapy. As a radiation oncology postgraduates, sometimes we all do not get a lot of chance for doing interstitial brachytherapy, and develop an inherent fear that whether we'll be able to perform this procedure for our patients or not. So let me tell you, friends, that for interstitial brachytherapy for soft tissue sarcoma is probably the simplest form of interstitial brachytherapy, because the cavity is open, the wound is open, you are standing in the operating theater. God forbid, generally nothing goes wrong, but God forbid if something goes wrong, you can manage it intraoperatively. You have the whole team of surgeons and anesthetists around you. And suppose worst scenario, suppose you do a brachytherapy yourself and the geometry or the dose distribution does not come out very well, does not matter. You can always give EBRT. Now in the present era, you can always do HDR based optimization. But other than that, even in spite of that, even if it is very bad, does not matter. You can always give EBRT. So whenever you get a chance, please try and do interstitial brachytherapy. It is extremely rewarding. It is extremely rewarding to do interstitial brachytherapy. So I had shared a screenshot of this paper with you yesterday. I will be talking about ABS consensus guidelines for soft tissue sarcoma brachytherapy. It's a big document. It's a must read document. It's a very well written document. So going forward, I will be talking about the practical aspects of doing interstitial brachytherapy. So if we look at the brachytherapy recommendations given by American Brachytherapy Society, it says for high-grade tumors, which are less than 10 centimeter in size and negative margin, one can treat these patients with brachytherapy alone. I mentioned it to you yesterday also. Suppose you have a tumor which is measuring 14 centimeter in size. Now, on 14 centimeter tumor, you will give at least 2 centimeter craniocaudal margins. So your treating length will be approximately 18 centimeter. Now, beyond that, also your catheters will go. So the catheter length will become 20 centimeters. So if you will put 20 centimeter long catheters inside the cavity, then maintaining the geometry and symmetry gets very difficult. So that is why practically it is not possible to implant such a big area. Now, this ABS paper also talks about avoiding brachytherapy in the phalangeal or the foot lesions. Foot brachytherapy or hand and foot radiation therapy itself is very challenging because there is much lesser soft tissue in the hands and feet. So even when you have to do external beam radiation therapy for a hand or foot sarcoma, it is much more challenging, and generally brachytherapy is not recommended. They also say that to minimize toxicity, preferably our catheters should be less than 10 centimeters. I would say that in my own experience, catheters have gone up to 15 to 16 in number. The dose should be prescribed at a dose which is less than 1 centimeter away from the catheter, because the far away, suppose instead of 1 centimeter, you're prescribing dose at 1.5 centimeter. Then the ISO dose, which is in the immediate contact with the catheter, will go on increasing. Generally, in soft tissue sarcoma brachytherapy, the dose is prescribed at 5 millimeter. You can go up to 7 millimeter, but certainly you should not go beyond 1 centimeter. The dose per fraction, as per their recommendation, should be kept less than 9 gray, and the dose to the nerve, as you can see here, has to be less than 90 gray. Oh, 90 gray is a big number. Huh? I'm sure none of us would prescribe that kind of doses. And radiation should start after waiting for at least 5 days after surgery before actually starting the treatment. Now, if you look at the other situations, everywhere else, ABS recommends that it should be a combination of EBRT and brachytherapy. For example, if you have a low-grade tumor, which is more than 5 centimeter with negative margins, and you want to add radiation therapy, then they say combination of EBRT and brachytherapy, because let me remind you that the brachytherapy trial from MSKCC did not show local control rate advantage over EBRT alone uh, for low-grade sarcomas. And that is why in low-grade sarcomas, we generally try to use a combination of EBRT and brachytherapy. If you have a high-grade tumor, which is very large, more than 10 centimeter, or any grade with close and positive margins, then it is preferable to combine brachytherapy plus EBRT. If you have a recurrent tumor which is previously not radiated, then again they recommend using a combination of EBRT and brachytherapy. But if it is re-radiation, then you have to preferably use brachytherapy alone for these patients. So when I'm talking about this slide of re-radiation, I'm reminded that I had a gentleman who had undergone a wide excision, so-called wide excision for a swelling in the anterior aspect of the thigh. And his margins were, I think positive or close. So once he came to me, it was operated by a general surgeon and not by our musculoskeletal surgeon. So when he came to me, I recommended that he should have a revision excision with intraoperative interstitial brachytherapy. He did not agree with that and he took external beam radiation therapy in some other center. 2 years later, he came back to us with recurrence. So now this was a recurrent tumor in previously radiated field. So that is why we did only interstitial brachytherapy for him. And I have a follow up with him for about 3 years, and he was doing well for those 3 years. So in this slide, in these last two slides, I have just tried to tell you when to do combination of EBRT and brachytherapy and when to do brachytherapy alone. Now, whenever you get a patient who's suitable for interstitial brachytherapy or is likely to be a candidate for interstitial brachytherapy, you must start evaluating patient well in the OPD itself. Measure all dimensions of the tumor and document it in your OPD note. When you're examining, check the relationship of the tumor with respect to skin, bones, joints, etc. Because if the lesion is very close to the joint, you might have some difficulty in introducing your needles and catheters. So, start thinking of what you're going to do in operating theaters. It is a good idea to have a procedural discussion with your surgical colleagues about how they are going to place incision and whether they are planning to do any plastic reconstruction. For example, in thigh tumors, a lot of these times your musculoskeletal surgeon will be doing a rotation plastic. They will mobilize flap from the local area and will just try to close the wound. But if they are mobilizing the local flaps, sometimes you might have a difficulty in inserting your needles and catheters. So it is a good idea to read all this before, discuss all this before actually starting the procedure. Now, another small point here is please go through the MRI of the patient. Have a look at the MRI so that you have some idea about the relationship of the tumor with respect to vessels, bones, skin, etc. And you make up some mind before that. Now, in spite of having done so many procedures, I try to reach OT before actually our surgeons give incision or the excision procedure starts, so that I understand what they are doing, and if I have some points in my mind when they're placing the incision, I should be there to put my point across to them. So try reaching operation theater on the day of procedure early. So once the surgeon has done removal of the tumor, it is a good idea that before the sample is sent for histopathology and before it becomes unsterile, examine the sample well. Then identify the tumor bed, palpate the tumor bed. And when you're palpating the tumor bed, try to understand where exactly was the tumor and how far have they excised in all dimensions, including craniocaudal, radial, and the depth. Then place surgical clips around the tumor bed or any area which is at the high risk of microscopic disease or any critical structures in that area, place surgical clips. Now, sometimes what we do is that to identify what is critical structure and what is not critical structure, what is the tumor margin, we put two clips around the borders of the tumor. We put one clip around the nerve, etc. You can put different kinds of clips also. Now, when you're examining the tumor bed, please examine for any blood vessels, nerves, etc., so that you know which areas you have to avoid. Because you have to avoid penetrating any blood vessels during catheter placement. Majority times you will not penetrate any blood vessels. You will be absolutely aware about it. Do not have such fears in your mind, because the cavity will be lying open in front of your eyes, and you will be actually seeing the blood vessels and the nerves. So sometimes sometimes when there is a big excision cavity, surgical excision cavity. When you go to the theater, you find that the cavity is actually, the bone is lying absolutely exposed. If it is possible, avoid direct catheter placement over bones and nerves has to be avoided. And what we generally do is we try to place the catheter close to the so avoid direct placement of catheters over bones and nerves. So if you have a bone or nerve, what you can do is that you can place a gel foam between the blood vessels and the catheters. Now the worry is that you know suppose this is the blood vessel and the catheter is lying right on the blood vessel, then the dose which is there in the immediate surrounding of the catheter, even we don't know what that dose is. If you will look at it in the planning system might show a 400% isodose, 500% isodose, 600% isodose. So that is why we try to avoid a direct contact and try to create some kind of a spacer between the bones, nerves, and blood vessels, etc. Although we all understand that peripheral nerves tolerate radiation very well. even if even if your catheter has to be in direct contact with the nerves, it is okay, or with the bones, it is okay, or with the blood vessels, it is okay. But try avoiding a needle continuously lying over the blood vessel or the nerve. So if this is the nerve and you have a needle which is, or catheter which is continuously lying down along the nerve, that is more dangerous. In that case, you can change the orientation of your catheters. You have to make a conscious effort to space the catheters away by placing a spacer to protect the OARs. Generally, the intercatheter distance is maintained between 1 to 1.5 centimeter. Now, your catheter placement can be either parallel to the incision or perpendicular to the incision or oblique to the incision. It does not matter as long as your catheters are parallel to each other. Now, how do we decide? For example, I was just talking about a gentleman where we did interstitial brachytherapy as a part of re-irradiation because we were trying to excise the previous surgical scar, previous irradiated area was causing some confusion about the tumor bed. So ultimately, our volume of radiation lengthwise became very large. So to cover that, we would have required 20 centimeter length catheters across the bed. So that is when we chose to place the catheters transversely, perpendicular to the incision, rather than along the incision. Sometimes you also choose the orientation of the catheters so that your surgeons will not have any problem in closure of the wound, because you don't want to increase the wound tension. Or sometimes you will decide on the orientation of the catheters because you want to avoid direct contact with the blood vessels and nerves. Another thing is that if it is a pedicle flap, for example, suppose there is a sarcoma in the chest and you are called to do brachytherapy and they are putting a PMMC flap, pectoralis major myocutaneous flap, then this flap will generally have a pedicle. You don't want to irradiate the pedicle of a flap because the pedicle of the flap carries the blood vessel. So according to all these factors, you will have to decide the orientation of your implant procedures. Once you've done first few procedures, then you get more experienced in doing it. Now, usually in soft tissue sarcoma, a single plane implant is done. It is very rarely that you would require a double plane implant for soft tissue sarcomas. 95% times a single plane implant will be enough. Three plane implant is never done for a soft tissue sarcoma. It is not required also. Whenever you're doing the implant, one should avoid crossing the joints. And if you have a sarcoma, which is very close to, say, the knee joint or the elbow, then after doing the implant, you have to give a cast or brace to the patient so that patients do not flex their joints after doing the procedure, because otherwise the catheters will get mispositioned. Now, this is a picture which is showing the area of implant. For example, this is from the ABS article only. This is a lesion in the thigh. This is the tumor bed. They have put the surgical clips all around, and then they have uh, uh, implanted the area 2 centimeter craniocaudal and 1 to 1.5 centimeters radially. Sometimes, because here, as you can see, the wound is very wide, so the catheter area is actually going, implanted area is going very far away in this direction. But ultimately, you will not load so much of length. Once you take a X-ray or CT scan, you will mark these clips, identify the tumor bed, and identify and decide how much length has to be loaded. So this entire, do not get worried by seeing this. This entire length may not get loaded or treated. Now, catheter entry and exit point should be at least 1 centimeter away from the wound incision, because otherwise, in the incision area, the vascularity is compromised because of the incision, and if your catheter entry point is very closed, which further reduces the local subcutaneous vascularity, then the chances of necrosis increase. Now, once you put the catheters in the tumor bed, you can fix them in the tumor bed. You want to make sure that the catheters are lying absolutely on the implant bed. They should not be in the hawa. Air mein nahi hone chahiye, hawa mein nahi hone chahiye. So you can fix them by taking vicryl sutures, which are absorbable sutures along the tumor bed, or you can anchor the buttons to the skin. You can stitch the buttons to the skin. I will show you some pictures to explain this. Sometimes we also, what we do is that we put the drain on the top of brachycatheters. So the brain has a negative suction. So once the drain is kept there, it also creates a negative suction and holds the catheters absolutely on the base of the implant. So this I have already talked about. CT simulation is generally done on day 4 or day 5. Now, for doing CT simulation, I want to emphasize that you do not need a CT simulator. It can be done on diagnostic CT scan also. If CT is not available, then do orthogonal X-rays. The simulation procedure of doing it with conventional simulator, X-ray based simulator, and CT scan are little different. For example, if you're taking X-rays, then you have to put the radio opaque dummies. It is essential for X-ray based planning. For CT based planning, they're optional. They are not mandatory. Because when you're doing a CT scan, you will see the air through the catheters, which will help you track the catheters. But if you're taking X-rays, then you have to put a radio opaque dummy. It is mandatory. Now, if you're doing a CT based planning, you will be able to see the skin around the extremity. In X-ray based planning, what you do is you place a copper wire on the skin so that later on you can calculate the doses which are going there. Now, when you're starting the CT simulation procedure, you have to make sure that the wound has begun to heal. It is not infected. Drains are working well. And if there is a flap, you should make sure that the flap has been taken up well. It is not dark. It is not dusky. So what I have faced sometimes is that, later on, otherwise the blame game starts. Your surgical oncologist will say that probably it was because of radiation that the flap has not taken up well. So I generally wait. It is a good idea to wait for 5 days if a flap has been inserted. There is no hurry. So that once flap is accepted well, you are reassured, patient is reassured, your surgeon is reassured, then start the procedure. Drain has to be kept as long as patient is on the brachytherapy, because otherwise the fluid will keep collecting there and it will increase the distance between the catheter and the upper part of the flap. Now, once you've done an X-ray or CT scan, you try and reconstruct the tumor based on the information which you get from the intraoperative findings, clips, preoperative imaging, etc., and then draw CTV and always contour skin for dose calculation purposes. I hope I am clear in what I am talking.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this Dr. Navneet?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So have you ever assisted or done an interstitial brachytherapy for sarcoma yourself?
Ma'am, it was done. One case was I have seen of sarcoma, but it was last year. And recently, like I have assisted a few brachy cases in the of prostate and cervix mainly.
Brachytherapy is an art which we all can pick up gradually, It is not necessary that you will do a lot of procedures in your post-graduation. Later on also, you can pick up these procedures. Any questions till now?
If there are any questions, please unmute and ask, or you can also use the chat box.
దీంట్లో గ్లాటిక్ క్యాన్సర్ లో నీకు గ్లాటిక్ క్యాన్సర్ లో ఇంకా నీకు ఇది లింఫాటిక్ గ్లాటిక్ మన రేడియోథెరపీ వాళ్ళకి చాలా ఇష్టం, ఎందుకంటే లింఫాటిక్స్ ఏం ఉండవు కదా, సో చిన్న ఫీల్డ్ ఇస్తారు ఇక్కడ వరకే.
I think you will have to mute everyone.
Yes.
యూనిట్ లో సార్
So we can continue, ma'am. If there are
Okay.
no.
So I will, before telling you about the plan evaluation, I will just, try to emphasize and show you one case. Now, this patient had undergone excisional biopsy kind of a thing outside. This is a thigh area. This is knee. This is leg. So I know Dr. Navneet only. I will ask him, can you tell me what is the mistake in this patient?
Ma'am, the scar is perpendicular. It should be, means the direction of the scar is wrong.
The direction of the scar is wrong. You're absolutely right. The scar should have been parallel to the femur. It is a transversely placed scar. So a transversely placed scar will contaminate the whole of the compartment. The scar should have been placed like this. But what can you do? It was done outside. And the histopathology came as synovial sarcomas and the margins were not known. Now this patient agreed for we suggested revision excision of the tumor bed and also interstitial brachytherapy for her. Our initial plan was that we would excise this scar and then extend incision in this direction and do brachytherapy. But when we started doing the procedure, we realized that there was not enough soft tissue for closure later on if we were to change the direction of the scar, and we had to live with this. So our surgeons first of all excised the scar, then they did excision of all around the tumor bed. Scar orientation, as I just now mentioned, could not be changed. Then we started doing our interstitial brachytherapy. So first of all, you have to examine the tumor bed. You have to see if there are any major blood vessels, any nerves, whether grossly the excision of the tumor is complete or not. Then can you see that with using my left hand, I'm holding the upper flap of the sarcoma, of the thigh. Can you see that? So by holding this between your thumb and rest of the fingers, you have to identify till where the surgeon has excised the tumor. Similarly, you have to palpate the lower flap also. And then you have to do your marking along this flap. Now, when you're doing marking along this flap, you can keep any distance between 1 to 1.5 centimeter between two catheters. This entry point and the exit point of the catheter should be almost along a line. For example, look at it here. You can't have one catheter out here, the other here, third one here, fourth one there. You can't have that. That will destroy the implant geometry. So when you're doing the marking, it has to be almost in a single line. It is a good idea to mark the clips, then palpate the entire surgical cavity, examine for any bleeding, examine for any blood vessels, nerves, and then you do marking with the pen of your entry and exit points while maintaining the equal intercatheter distance. Now, how do you decide कि मतलब नीडल नीचे से डाल के यहाँ निकालनी है versus ऊपर से डाल के नीचे निकालनी है? So this decision we generally take based on ease of connecting the catheters later on. For example, here what we decided was that this is near the inguinal fold. This is near the knee joint area. So we said if we connecting this area will be easier because this exit end tube is going to get connected to the brachytherapy machine. So here, as you can see, my needle placement or the catheter orientation is perpendicular to the incision. Had the incision been like this, again, you would have had two choices. You could have placed your catheters longitudinally or you could have placed them across. Sometimes you can even take a stay suture between this flap and this flap to see how the closure of the wound, surgical wound would later on look like. So this is another view which I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you one more thing here. Now make sure, I hope you are able to appreciate that the catheters have been sutured to the bed using Vicryl. Catheters जो है हवा में नहीं होने चाहिए. They should be absolutely on the operated bed as much as possible. And sometimes, because you want to make sure that the catheters are lying on the operative bed, on this bed, you have to start implanting from little far away so that you get the depth. I think this is something which you have to learn intraoperatively. I'm not sure how much you'll be able to appreciate it through this presentation. These buttons which are used are radio opaque buttons. So these buttons you will be able to identify in your X-rays and CT scans, which you do later on. So I will go back by a few slides. So I have just briefly covered when to do brachytherapy alone versus brachytherapy plus EBRT. Second thing that I started off was how to assess a patient preoperatively, how to do procedure intraoperatively. Then you have to do CT simulation, where again you have two choices. You can do either X-ray based planning or you can do a CT based planning. Now going further, I have told you how to do implant, what precautions. In this patient also, by the way, we had applied the brace across the knee joint, because if the patient was flexing the joint, there would have been increased tension in the wound, as well as our catheters would have also got, there was a chance that they could have got kinked. Now, how do you see a plan? So when you're seeing a plan, first you have to visualize first of all, you have to understand that generally the dose is prescribed at, we follow Paris system, and the dose is prescribed at 0.5 centimeters above and below the surface of below the center of the catheter. At the max, you can go up to 1 centimeter. More than 1 centimeter prescription is not allowed for the single plane implant. If you think that the depth that you need to prescribe is going to be more, then you probably need to do 2-plane implant and not a single plane implant. But majority patients will not require a 2-plane implant. Now, after you've done this, then you have to, first of all, you have to see the dose wash. You have to see the dose distribution. When you're seeing the dose distribution, see 100% isodose line, then see 90% isodose lines. So in 100% or 90% isodose lines, there should not be many breaks. So between two catheters, it should not be breaking down. So the distribution will look something like this. So here you can see that this is a continuous line. You may not always get such ideal dose distribution. But then at the same time, you cannot have an isodose which is looking, you cannot have your prescription isodose which looks something like this blue volume. Cycle chain ke jaise dikh raha hai. It is breaking down in between. So there are a lot of areas of cold spot here. Your isodose line should be a continuous line. Generally, the prescription is done either at 100% or 90 or least at 80% line. Suppose I'm prescribing at 80% line, then I'm creating a 20% hotspot inside. If I'm prescribing at 90%, I'm considering 90% isodose line as my prescription isodose line. I'm again adding 10% additional hotspot inside. So first of all, you have to look at the isodose which is covering your target volume well. Second thing that you have to note is whether 150% or 200%, how much is there inside. So 200% should not be a coalescent line. It should be separate, only around the catheters. Otherwise, you need to optimize your implant. 150% also should not be very big areas of 150% clubbed together. They should be little scattered areas. Otherwise, you might need optimization. Another thing that you have to see in the implant is what is the dose which is going to the skin. So for seeing the skin dose here, this is a CT-based planning. So here you can very well see the skin. So what I do is I generally contour 5mm skin. I even contour bone. This is not our patient. This is a ABS paper patient. So I generally look at these things. You have to make sure that the skin is getting less than 2/3 of the prescription isodose. So suppose you're prescribing 40 gray. So your skin should not be getting something more than 32 gray, should not be going to the skin. So you have to verify all these things. So the DVH parameters that we generally look for are volume receiving 100% dose, volume receiving 150% of the prescription isodose, dose to 90% volumes. When you're looking at dose to the OAR, you look at dose to 0.1 cc, dose to 1 cc, and dose to 2 cc. Then you calculate the dose homogeneity index, which is calculated by this formula of volume receiving 100% minus volume receiving 150% upon V 100%. Acceptable DHI, ideally it should be less than 0.8. You can accept it up to 0.6 also. And as I said, you have to avoid continuous 150 and 200% isodose lines. Ideally, volume receiving 100% dose should be more than 90 to 95%. Volume receiving 150%, which is a hotspot, should be less than 40 to 50%. We generally try and keep it to less than 30%. Dose to 90% volume should be between the range of 90 to 100%. Dose to skin should be less than 2/3 of the prescription isodose. And whenever you're choosing the loading position of the HDR source, then it should be more than 0.5 centimeter away from the skin surface. So you have to look at all these parameters as I just now explained. This also, I have just mentioned it to you that the prescription is generally done at 0.5 centimeter from the depth of prescription. More than 1 centimeter is not recommended. Now, what do you do on the day of treatment? First of all, you have to check for the catheter position. You have to make sure that your tumor bed geometry is reasonably maintained. If there is any seroma, hematoma, you have to make sure that the wound has started healing before starting the treatment. Now, if your surgeons have done a primary closure, then you can start brachytherapy by day 5. If you're giving a monotherapy, if you're giving full dose by brachytherapy, if you're planning to do only brachytherapy boost, then you can start even earlier because you know that your total dose is going to be less. And if there is any wound infection or breakdown, hold the procedure even if you put the catheters in place. Now, while this patient is living there in the hospital or coming from home for 5 to 7 days with interstitial brachytherapy catheters, you have to provide these patients catheter care. You have to limit the patient's movement to avoid displacing or kink in the catheters. We generally keep an internal lead in the hollow catheters so that the catheters do not bend. And make sure that, after every brachytherapy delivery, you clean the wound and dry it well. We avoid wetting the implant by bathing and shower, lest the water enters into the tubes. Then there will be a problem. We also regularly apply betadine, etc., around the catheter's entry points and entry and exit points to avoid any infection traversing through these catheter puncture sites. We all have to know how to do the implant. We also have to understand what are the precautions which are required for the catheter removal also. Any catheter removal has to be done under sterile conditions, sterile techniques, and you have to initially clean the area well with antiseptics to sterilize the catheters and the neighboring wound, etc. Then you have to cut the sutures which have been used to fix the buttons to the skin. And then you have to gradually cut the tubes and then apply gentle pressure and remove all the catheters. Once you've removed all the catheters, you slightly press the cavity so that whatever seroma has accumulated will also get removed. And if there is any drain inside, you have to remove the drain also on the day of removal of catheter. Now, for re-radiation, American Brachytherapy Society has recommended for re-radiation recurrent sarcoma, brachytherapy is preferred. We should avoid any closure of wound intention. मतलब खींच खांच के बंद, जो मेडिकल कॉलेजेस में हम बोलते हैं ना, खींच तान के बंद कर दिया, जबरदस्ती बंद कर दिया. And top of it, you have given brachytherapy. On top of it, the patient is getting re-radiation, previously operated also. So then if such closures tend to give way, then the patients will have more wound healing issues. So if the defect is very big, it is a good idea to request your surgeon. Generally, they would only take care that they should do a flap closure rather than primary closure for these patients. They have also recommended that the complication rates are higher if the re-radiation dose is more than 60 gray or the cumulative dose is more than 111 gray. Depending on your dose per fraction, you have to calculate EQD2 of first radiation as well as second radiation and then do these calculations for your patients. These are the general recommended doses for brachytherapy. For example, if you're combining EBRT with brachytherapy using HDR, Then generally EBRT is given in the dose of 45 to 50 gray, and brachytherapy is given in the dose of 12 to 20 gray with a fraction size of 3 to 4 gray per fraction. If you're doing brachytherapy alone, you may use a total dose of 30 to 50 gray. We generally give 32 gray in 8 fractions or 40 gray in 10 fractions to our patients. This is also very well tabulated here about the coverage, which we've already talked about. Now, the ABS paper also gives certain constraints. This is the first paper, this is the only paper which gives some constraints to the nerves, vessels, bones, etc. And I suggest all of you can go through this later on. So I will share with you one instance. So I was working in one of the regional cancer centers, and I had just passed out about 1 to 2 years. This incident happened 1 to 2 years after my completing of my post-graduation. So a surgeon suddenly gave me a call from OR saying that, can you come and do brachytherapy for this patient? And this was a sarcoma in the chest, and they were planning to do flap for that patient. I was not sure at that time whether one can do brachytherapy safely with flap or not. I thought in my mind that if there is any damage to the flap, then the patient and the doctor, this operating surgeon, will curse me. So when I was coming out, I just overheard the surgeon saying, "Isko karna nahi aata." That is why she refused. And so मुझे लगा कि let me just read about it. Let me find out from the scientific literature whether it is actually possible to do brachytherapy with a myocutaneous flap or not. And I realized after going through a lot of literature that there are several recommendations which say that we can safely do interstitial brachytherapy even when a reconstruction is planned for these patients. So once a flap has been taken up or once a skin graft has been taken up, its tolerance is as good as the original or the naive muscle and the skin. So you please need not worry. If you're ever called to do brachytherapy in a patient where the tumor defect size is large and the surgeon is planning to do a reconstruction, it is not a contraindication. So I will just show you some pictures from the literature. These are not my patients. So there is a literature. This is a picture which is showing that this was a sarcoma at the shoulder end. And this is how it looked after excision. And probably the surgeon has taken latissimus dorsi muscle from here, अंदर से ही डाल दिया होगा इसको, pedicle flap की तरह डाल दिया. From as a pedicle flap, it was inserted here, and the radiation oncologist has done brachytherapy. Whenever we get chance to do brachytherapy, we all must do brachytherapy and not get scared. This is another patient which is mentioned in the literature. So this patient actually had a sarcoma in this region. Left thigh, there was a big sarcoma. So they have done a pedicle flap again for this patient. This is the flap. And now look at the position of the catheters. So the catheter are actually exiting partly through the flap. Then also there does not seem to be any problem. Look at it here. They have put the catheters from this end and then have taken it out. If they were to take it out here, then it probably would have been a very, very long course. And this is how the patient looks in the post-operative stage after the wound has healed up. These are the pock marks of the needles. So please do not get scared about this. This is another paper. So in this paper, I found that there was this young boy, 52 years old gentleman, and he had a lesion in the thigh, quite a large lesion. This is almost like a circumferential lesion, long lesion. So they have removed it. Then the radiation oncologist has done the intraoperative interstitial brachytherapy. And as you can see that the catheters are lying on the bare bone, there is no problem. And after that, now because the defect size is large, they have removed this much of the width. The defect size is large, probably the primary closure was not good enough. So what they have done is they have put a small myocutaneous flap here along with the primary closure. And this is how the catheters are looking like. And look at the number of catheters. Close to 20 catheters are placed here. So sometimes you have little choice. Whenever in doubt, do brachytherapy. Whenever in doubt, put extra needles. You may not treat all the needles later on. And this is how the dose distribution looks like. Now with external beam radiation therapy, we can never get such kind of dose distribution. This is 50% isodose line. This is the only slice of sarcoma bed which has to be radiated. And this is how it looked in the post-operative follow-up period. This is looking so nice and clean. You can see some needle marks over here. This myocutaneous flap has also healed up well. This is one of our patients. I'll tell you about this patient. So we had done this interstitial brachytherapy when I was at Patna. So this young gentleman had come from Gorakhpur and he had a sarcoma, big sarcoma in the interscapular region between the two scapulas. Now, this was a recurrent lesion. This is the incision of the previous surgery. And you can see some radiation-induced changes here. So he had already received about 50 grain 25 fractions at Gorakhpur. And I could see that it was a single posterior field which was given. And I was also working in a cobalt setup only and did not have linear accelerator, etc. And my biggest worry was about the spinal cord because I knew that the spinal cord would have got all the doses that it could tolerate. So we decided to do interstitial brachytherapy for this patient. Number of catheters and a large number of catheters that we've inserted. And our surgeons had planned a pedicle flap for him. And this was the first patient that I did with pedicle flap, and there were no problems. So this was done out of desperation because I did not have anything else to offer to this gentleman. After that, we've done several cases. We've realized some principles. One principle that I have realized is that whenever you're doing it with a pedicle flap, I generally place a gel foam between the catheters and the flap. Meaning ये catheters और flap के बीच में gel foam की बड़ी sheet लगाती हूँ. So that because the catheters need not radiate this flap. The catheters are meant to irradiate the base of the tumor bed to decrease the dose here. Second thing which I do is that I place the drain over the catheters so that they also kind of act as a spacer between the flap and the catheters. Third is that I avoid putting my needles across the pedicle. Whenever I start doing such an implant, I examine the vascular pedicle. We should not be giving dose to the vascular pedicle. Fourth and the last point is wait for 5 days, 7 days. Once your surgeons, plastic surgeons are satisfied that the flap is being taken up well, it is not getting necrosed, then only start radiation for this patient. Now I will tell you about one of the regrets that I had after doing this brachytherapy. Although you may not be able to appreciate it here, when we did our simulation and dose calculation, we realized that the central area was more deeper than the peripheral areas. So later on, I regretted that I could have put 2-plane implant in the center. You may not do continuous 2-plane implant, but in the center where the depth was more, later on I thought that I could have put 2-plane implant in the center. So the basic principle anybody who does brachytherapy will tell you is that whenever you have doubt, put extra needles, because later on you cannot move, you cannot add needles easily. It is better to put it initially. You may not treat it. Now somebody is asking in the chat box how to remove the gel foam. Gel foam need not be removed. It is absorbable. It is bioabsorbable material. It gets absorbed on its own. Surgeons use a lot of gel foam during surgery. For example, hepatic surgery. They will pack the liver bed with gel foams, multiple gel foams. It gets absorbed and it controls the bleeding, etc. So it is an ABS recommendation, and I also agree with it that one should not do what is in our medical colleges called खींच खांच के बंद नहीं करना है. Tension में नहीं होना चाहिए आपका implant or wound area. Otherwise, then there is a high risk of wound complication. Use a flap, either a pedicle flap, which is also called as rotation flap, or a free flap, especially when there is a large wound diameter or the surgeons have excised a lot of skin. The target volume is very big, or you have a lower extremity disease where the wound complications are more, when there is a major neurovascular bundle involvement, previously irradiated, or if your patient has a lot of issues which can impair the wound healings like smoking, diabetes, peripheral vascular diseases, all these patients you should prefer to do you should prefer to do flap closure rather than the primary closure. I think there are some questions in the chat box. I'm not able to see them. I'm not able to see the questions in the chat box right now. Probably I will take them up a little later on. Now, sometimes if there is a lot of seroma formation, I don't know whether you've seen or not, the surgeons will apply the negative pressure vacuum suction drainage. So this is the kind of wound vacuum. So here, what is shown in this picture is, suppose the defect is very large. Suppose the tumor is very close to the skin. Suppose the tumor is infected. Then your surgeon may not be comfortable doing a primary closure or flap brachytherapy, pedicled or free flap at the time of brachytherapy and incision itself. Because imagine if there was a flap here, then that flap would also get radiation dose from these catheters, right? So what they do is they just excise the tumor. You do the interstitial brachytherapy, and they close the wound by using a wound vacuum. This wound vacuum here through suction is connected to the vacuum pump, which maintains the negative suction pressure here so that the seroma or any exudate is not allowed to get collected. So if you do a if your surgeon does an excision, you do brachytherapy, in next 2 to 3 days, you can start treating these catheters. After 7 days, once you remove your catheters, then the surgeon will do staged reconstruction as a separate procedure. That is also possible. The advantage is that the flap will not get radiated. Another small point that I wanted to mention was that in case it is a re-radiation and your surgeon is planning to do a reconstruction for wound closure, then the flap should be raised from previously non-irradiated site. Now, probably this is my last slide. My last slide is that although we always fear when our brachytherapy catheters are lying right on the major nerves or the blood vessels, but then there are several studies. I have quoted just one study here, a small study of 79 patients who were treated with EBRT plus brachytherapy showed that proximity to nerves or blood vessels do not predict for neuropathy or vasculopathy. So we need not fear blood vessels or nerve, etc. So my take-home message after 2 days of class is that organ conservation approach in oncology actually started with sarcomas. Wide local excision and radiation is now standard of care. There is no role of amputation, and radiation therapy has an undisputed role in improving the local control rate and overall survival for these patients and improving their quality of life. Many thanks to all of you for your patient listening. I think today also we've taken almost 50 minutes. So there are some questions in the chat box. So Dr. Ajitesh Avinash is asking what precautions are to be taken to prevent kinking of catheters. So Dr. Avinash, my few suggestions are that the catheters, you have to put a leader inside the catheter. You know, if it is a hollow tube, the catheter is like a hollow tube. You have to put some tube inside the catheter so that they do not bend. Second, if the catheters are near any joint, you have to prevent movement of those joints. Okay, another important question which Dr. Avinash has asked is what is to be done if there is a kink in the catheter? If there is a kink in the catheter, please do not take chance for using HDR or inserting LDR sources through it because the source might get stuck. In that case, there is a technique called as railroad technique through which you have to replace the catheter. I cannot demonstrate it to you. So if this is the catheter, then you cut the catheter at both the button ends. Put another tube through it and remove the kinked catheter. I can only show it to you once, we are doing some practical classes. But you have to replace the catheters, and without any additional anesthesia, local or general, it is possible to replace the catheters by using a technique called as railroad technique. Thank you, Dr. Avinash.
Ma'am, there are a few more questions from is there any chance of tumor seeding when we do the intraoperative placement of the catheters?
No, no way. We come into picture after the tumor has been removed. And brachytherapy for soft tissue sarcoma is now being done for last 30-40 years. No such case has been reported ever.
And ma'am, what was the need to remove the scar? Like in one patient which you demonstrated, you said that the scar has to be removed surgically, but it could not be removed. But what was the need? Couldn't we just place the catheters perpendicular to the previous scar?
No. In that case, we had to do a revision excision because the margins were not known. So when you're doing a revision excision, you always freshen up the scar also, because there was already a scar. You could not have given another scar for re-excision. You go through the previous wound always. That's a surgical principle. If there are any surgeons, I think Dr. Akshay might be there. He might be able to answer this question.
And ma'am, one place you said that there must not be dip in the dose because it causes a cold spots formation.
Yes.
So if we see that there is a dip in the dose isodose line of maybe 150% or maybe 200%, but if there is no dip in the 100% isodose, so will it be acceptable? Like, do we need to check each isodose line should be straight, or
No.
will
So
100%
each isodose
isodose
line can never be straight. Each isodose line can never be straight. What you have to see is that your prescription isodose line, for example, if I choose 100% as my prescription isodose line, or 90% or 85%, that prescription isodose line should not have a lot of dips, because you would not like to have a lot of dips in your prescription isodose volume, which is covering your target.
Okay, ma'am. If there are any questions, please you can unmute and ask, or maybe you can use the chat box. So ma'am, I think there are no more questions.
Okay.
So I am really grateful, ma'am. You spent your precious time to educate us all, and I'm really thankful. And we all look forward to more learning from you, ma'am. Thank you.
Dr. Navneet, you have my number. If there are
Sure.
any other topics which you want me to take up anytime, for example, my few favorite topics are breast cancer, cervical cancer, brachytherapy, brain SRS, total skin electron therapy, lymphomas, anything. मतलब मैं कुछ भी अगर आप लोगों के लिए कर सकूं, then I'll be very happy to teach you all.
It will be our privilege, ma'am.
Yeah, and I work at Max Hospital Delhi, and कभी कोई आना चाहे मतलब ऑब्जर्वरशिप वगैरह के लिए तो भी आ सकते हैं.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah,
Certainly, ma'am.
thank you so much. Good night
Thank
to all
you.
of you.
Good night, ma'am.